Howdy again, everybody. This is Doc with Thorofan, and it is time for part 2 of our sit-down interview with Dr. Mary Robinson of the Pennsylvania Equine Testing and Research Laboratory, located right here in Pennsylvania. And they're one of the few HISA-accredited and HIWU-accredited labs throughout the country that are used to test post-race samples, out-of-competition testing samples, as well as the main testing laboratory for the standardbred industry here in Pennsylvania, looking for evidence of performance-enhancing drugs, banned substances, levels of therapeutic substances, things like that. In the first part of the interview, we talked a lot about what the testing process itself involves and what happens from the time that blood or urine is taken from the horse to getting to the lab, to going through the entire testing process and how the results are interpreted. And then, if a positive or altered analytical finding, sometimes as they call it, is found, and then what the process goes on from there. And of course, there'll be a link at the end of this video that you can click on to see the first part of that interview. In the second part, we talk about two main things, and the first is probably something that's on everybody's mind every time you hear the rumors of this person's doping, that person's doping, these horses are juiced up, and that is, well, why can't the labs find this stuff? And if they're using some new substance, new compound, whatever, why can't the labs just pick it up in a regular blood or urine test? And Dr. Robinson does a really good job of explaining it's not that simple, and there's a lot that goes into being able to both developing a test for a new substance and then validating that test so that it would stand up, if it were brought through the legal process or challenged or anything like that. The other part of this sit-down interview talks about what might be considered kind of the holy grail of doping testing and testing for performance-enhancing drugs in racehorses, and that is what is known as biopassports. And we're nowhere near having these things mainstream yet, but I will say that PETRL has probably been in the forefront in doing a lot of this, in banking a lot of samples to be able to create what we call a biobank, and we talk a little bit about that as well. And everything that goes into looking at normal and abnormal parameters and different substances that are found in the blood that kind of indicate potentially that a horse has been given a performance-enhancing substance. So hopefully this will answer a lot of questions as we go ahead and sit down with Dr. Robinson to discuss both developing new tests and biopassports in racehorses. All right, so we are back with Dr. Mary Robinson, who is the lab director at PETRL. And if you just wanted to again say what PETRL stands for so everybody knows, because we see that acronym all the time.
It's the Pennsylvania Equine Toxicology and Research Laboratory.
Okay. And one thing I think that's on everybody's mind, and this gets asked all the time, because the current comment that's always out there is the chemists are always one step ahead, or the cheaters are always one step ahead of the chemists, because they're always altering things and things like that. And, well, if they're cheating, why can't you just pull blood tests and find what they're using? Mm-hmm. And so I think people do at least now understand a little bit that you need to have the substance so you know kind of what you're looking for. And we talked a little bit about that before when we were talking about the screening tests and looking for that evidence. But at least speaking in generalities, because obviously everything's a little different, what is kind of the process of both creating a test for a certain substance and then kind of validating it to the point where it would, I mean, unfortunately, we have to go the legal route where it would stand up to like courtroom scrutiny and scientific scrutiny.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we've talked about so far is targeted testing, mm-hmm. right? Where we have a substance of interest and we are looking for that substance of interest. And so there's a lot of substances. I mean, we're constantly updating our screening tests to include more and more substances. And we're over 1,000 at this point. I mean, obviously that list is confidential.
Obviously not. We wouldn't ask you, what's...
But we are constantly updating that list. To do that takes having a reference standard. So you need to have ideally a certified reference standard, which means that the company that created it certifies that it is a certain level of purity, usually like 96-97% pure, that what we're getting is that drug. And has been certified and comes with a certificate and all of that. And then once we have that, we can do an injection into the instrument instead of just doing the extraction and from a sample, like a plasma sample, we can create a solution and inject it directly into the instrument so that we can get the signature for that drug. Mm-hmm. And then once we get that, while we're doing that, once we inject that into the instrument, we can optimize kind of the conditions of the instrument itself and what we're using like on the instrument for each individual drug. And so that's for a confirmation test, that's, easy enough because you're optimizing for one substance. For a screening test, you've got maybe 500 other substances in there in that test. And so if you inject it using the test that you want to add it to, if you have to change something to increase the sensitivity for that particular compound, then you have to check all 500 other compounds to make sure that you didn't just mess up the sensitivity for another compound. So it's a very fine balancing act to add, sometimes you get lucky and you add it and the chemistry is similar enough that you don't need to change anything for the screening test. But oftentimes it's a balancing act and you'll adjust the parameters slightly and then check to make sure that everything else is still being detected with a sufficient level of detection. So that's the process for adding a new targeted drug. What everyone's really been trying, like the holy grail essentially for drug testing forever and ever, has been untargeted drug testing. Yeah. So what I mean by untargeted drug testing is that you don't know what has been given or what you're looking for. You run it through the instrumentation and then you analyze that data to try and find anything that you think shouldn't be there. And Dr. Fuyu Guan in my lab is the lead PI on trying to develop these types of methods. We've got some publications on that. We've got one from 2021 and a couple from 2023. And we've got a grant that we're from the RMTC that we're working on with this as well. And so we've made some really exciting progress using AI with this untargeted testing platform. It's not quite there yet because essentially we're getting like way more hits than what we can feasibly follow up on. But we're getting it to narrow down on like what is expected and what's not. And I'm really excited about that as a future way to stay ahead of everybody. Because if we can identify, what is normal and in the end, eventually probably longitudinal testing. So what is normal for that particular horse? Then that gives us the ability to see when that's been perturbed, by a drug of interest. So that's the challenge, though, is pulling that out from like any other thing that may have perturbed what is normal, right? And so that's it's a huge challenge. It's something that a lot of people have been working on for many, many years, and I'm excited that we're getting closer and closer.
And along those same lines, I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about kind of not only the drug, but the metabolites and stuff that can potentially be forced. Is that something that you kind of use your research herds with too, as far as just tracking like what might develop from those drugs safely, of course, obviously.
Oh, of course, yes. No, of course. And that's, so we have a herd of about 25 horses, and we do these, very controlled administration studies in those animals with very low doses because I don't want to deal with any horrible side effects. That's not the type of research that we do. We're looking at low doses and looking for what happens when a horse is exposed to that substance. How long can we detect it for? What's the optimal way to detect it? And yes, for biological passport type development and untargeted testing, looking at it over time in those individual animals. That's something that we've been working on for quite some time now. So we also have an equine biobank where we've been collecting samples from horses in their first year of training to be able to look at the sample longitudinally over time as they're training, with the permission obviously of the trainer and the owner, and with input from them on what those horses have received and what types of injuries they may have or what changes in their training schedule they may have. So that's been providing us a lot of helpful information as well for understanding how we can use these biomarkers in the real world for like a biological passport type situation.
And for the kind of like the research herds that you have too, is there any kind of breed variability? Like, do you mostly have thoroughbreds and thoroughbreds and standardbreds because obviously that's what most of what you guys test, or is it?
Yes.
Will breed affect kind of?
So to be honest, I think we don't really know yet. Okay. We do have both thoroughbreds and standardbreds. And for the biological passport, I think at some point it's worth looking to make sure that there's consistencies between the breeds. We did this for testosterone. So Dr. Soma, Lawrence Soma, my predecessor, did quite a lot of work on testosterone in the racing populations, both in geldings and mares and also in intact stallions. And that's really the approach that needs to be taken for any of these endogenous things or any of the biomarkers that may be identified. We need to look at the different populations that are out there that we're actually interested in. And so he looked at both thoroughbreds and standardbreds, and there were some very slight differences, but nothing really statistically significant. But I do think it's important to keep in mind that there could be breed differences for biomarkers that are identified. So I do think it's something that you have to research and look into.
Okay. No, that's really good. And then the last thing, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit through, but one of the things that's been brought up and mentioned quite a few bit is this idea, I think, of maybe what also would be considered kind of the holy grail, as you were talking about, these biopassports and the research into that. And I know there's been a lot of work done on the human athlete side with these for finding. So if you could just kind of describe exactly what we mean by a biopassport and how it could potentially be used to detect a substance.
Yeah, sure. So a biological passport is something that it's essentially tests that you're running to look at the normal things that are found in the horse. So all the metabolites that are there normally, the little mRNA molecules that are there normally, any of those any of those products that are in the horse, in the blood or the urine, that you can use to follow over time and see if they've been affected. So I think as far as where we are, there's some really good research that's been done. One of the, I have a postdoc in my lab, Dr. Bethany Keene, who's published on these dopamine drugs that alter dopamine metabolism. And so when she did that work, she was able to use something called metabolomics to look and see all the effects on the metabolites in the horses. This was done in Australia with her mentor, Dr. Adam Cawley, over there. And it's just really incredible because she could use those biomarkers, those metabolomic changes, to identify horses that are suspect for having been given these dopamine altering substances. So that's, I think, the promise of doing biomarker and biological passports is being able to better identify horses that have been given a substance that may be altering kind of their normal endogenous pathways that we wouldn't otherwise be easily able to detect.
And are there, like, as far as at least in the initial stages of working with these passports and cataloging them, where you guys feel pretty confident that you can now determine, like, if a certain biomarker is present, it's with a certain amount of certainty due to that drug, or is that still a ways off as far as?
So I think, like, if you read her papers, there's levels that have been established for some of these things that basically say, like, if you are outside of that range, then something happened to change that level, right? And that it's really consistent with being given this substance. To be honest, I don't know how well I don't know if it's been challenged. I don't know if that's going to go through litigation that way. I think that's the challenge for us is with these biomarkers, you really, I think, need to have concrete longitudinal samples from a large population and from probably multiple populations as well. So I think we are still a bit in the early stages, but I think the more and more data that we accumulate and the more data, the more we need to use the AI to be able to process that data. And I think that's going to get us there eventually. I think right now we've definitely made a good start, but I do think we've still got some ways to go. I think that's the best answer I can provide, actually.
No, I mean, and I think, like, one thing that's great too, and you've talked about this multiple times at some of the commission meetings, is the collaboration you guys have with other labs. So, like, that allows you to expand that sample size so much more quickly than having to do the research yourself as far as that goes. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think working together with, within the U.S. and then also within the international community is huge. That's really, we have great researchers in the equine drug testing industry that, lots of people are really willing to share information and work together. We are all we're all proponents for the horse and trying to do what's best for the horse. And we have a conference that we go to called the International Conference of Racing Analysts and Veterinarians. It's typically every other year. COVID, of course, just messed that up. But that conference is it's huge because it brings everybody together and we get to share information and push the science forward. And that's just so important for the industry. We're really fortunate to have a lot of great people working on this.
Oh, that's great, and we really appreciate everything you guys are doing, both to keep the sport legit as far as trying to catch the cheaters as quickly as we can, but also, and I think more importantly, obviously again we're all looking out for the safety and welfare of the horse. So finding those and being able to allow those horses to stay as safe as possible, obviously is the main goal. So thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us. We really appreciate it. And as things progress and change, hopefully we'll be able to come back and talk more about that at a future time.
Sounds great. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks.
So I hope that helps kind of answer some of the questions people may have had. It certainly helped answer a lot of the questions I had regarding this subject, and especially a lot of the newer and exciting things that may lie on the horizon. And with the advent of artificial intelligence, maybe a lot sooner on that horizon than it would have been even 1 to 2 or 5 years ago. I want to thank Dr. Robinson for taking the time to sit down with us and explain all of this in ways that is hopefully easy for everybody to understand. And with all the changes that are going on, if you had any other questions that maybe popped up while listening to this interview, go ahead and drop them in the comments. We always are able to sit down with Dr. Robinson again, hopefully in the near future, and have some of these questions answered for you. So if you do have any questions, drop them in the comments or send us a line at Thorofan. I'll see what I can do about getting those answers for you. So this is Doc with Thorofan again, and as always, if you are looking for the most accurate and up-to-date information about this wonderful sport of thoroughbred horse racing, put on by the racing fan for you, the racing fan, there's only one place that you should be turning to, and that's Thorofan.
Mm-hmm.